the people of the United States, in order to serve their purpose, establish justice, liberty for ourselves and our posterity. We will
Betty Friedan in her book, The Feminine Mystique. And she said here, women who adjust as housewives, who grow up wanting to be just a housewife, are in as much danger as the millions who walked to their own death in the concentration camps. They ate suffering, a slow death of mind and spirit.
That's right.
Like those are those lies that you're talking about.
Yeah.
In what way do you think that even conservatives have sometimes drank from this poison well?
It's a great question, especially because I think we consider now the world in Marxist terms where the market is the most important place to be and the home is not. The Marxist world has no conception of the value of home and passing along values. All meaning is established in the market, in competition, in class equality, and your job and your career. It's always like, my career, I have to go do this thing out there in the world, because out there in the world for men and women is where I find meaning. And that's the only place where meaning exists, as opposed to, no, great meaning and richness is found in the home. You lose the ability to go out into the wider world, but we're not taught how much value is in the home for cultivating the exact sorts of things that you're talking about. Imagining your daughters playing music in the home on a Sunday, or family get-togethers, just how full of life and light your household must be with that. And to pass that on to their kids, like hundreds of musicians down through the ages potentially. And when you look at that, when you have that conception of homes being filled with light, the market begins to get very dim. But we don't think in those terms anymore.
Right.
Yeah, it's good. One way I like to put it is, there's a sense in which what feminism has sold to women is the opportunity to throw a perpetual tantrum in exchange for the opportunity to influence a multi-generational legacy. Right? There's a sense in which what's been sold to women is in fact a lesser glory.
Very much.
Right. And this kind of goes back to the garden, right? Genesis 3. What Satan was tempting Eve with was not really true ambition in that sense. It was actually a lesser glory.
Well, it was envy.
Right.
You know,
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
and so much of what what's ailing our culture right now is born from envy. You see that in again, any the social media posts or the arguments that are going against the more traditional model or against the wealthy or things like that. It's envy is such a, I think in many respects, a forgotten but powerful sin that people choose to ignore. But that's so much of what's animating our culture right now. I wanted to hit a little something though. There is, you can go and we see it in households that are oppressed by a toxic father, right? And I don't say toxic masculinity because I don't believe in that, but by a sinful desire to control, to overpower, to oppress their family, and sometimes they're using the excuse of the patriarchal biblical model, and they're just tyrannical. And every time we talk about this subject, that's the reflexive pushback is, oh, you're endorsing, blah, 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 blah. It's like, no. We're talking about very happy households that include, by the way, you talk about the marketplace. Proverbs 31 woman was out in the marketplace, managing the affairs of the household. I mean, you are managing a business with income. You are managing something, and if you have a true, awesome partner in that respect, your wife understands what's happening, in the dynamics of how to manage the family, and is not, kept quiet in a corner somewhere, changing diapers, or cooking your food. And again, the left and what they've systematically done is put those negative, terrible images and those terrible models of a abusive husband and father, in the heads, and that's certainly not the biblical model, and that's certainly not the beauty of what the family should look like, and what it looks like in most successful Christian households.
The example that I often give has been erased from our culture to paint that picture of the tyrannical father. So I think the examples of tyrannical fathers that All in the Family, that sitcom in the late 60s, early 70s, I think that the amount that was going on was probably exaggerated, culturally exaggerated by mass media. But what I say is, the way that I wasn't around back then, but this is how I think it used to work. Bunch of guys like us would get together and play cards, have some drinks, sit around the table, and I don't know. I'll pick on myself, so I have to pick on any of you guys. So then wife comes in, starts talking to the guys, and she's like, "Get your butt back in the kitchen. Just go back to playing cards." And you all would exchange a look, right? And then later, you'd say, "Hey, let's go outside and talk for a second." We go outside, smoke a cigar, and you look at me and say, "You ever talk to your wife that way again in front of me, you're going to hear from me about it."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I think men used to have that accountability amongst each other, which
well,
prevented
men-
the tyrannical father.
Yeah, so I mean, justice has been kind of largely absent in our culture, and we've seen that. But you used to have masculine enforcers in communities,
Right.
and
That's
so
right.
if there was a
Virtue, they enforce virtue.
correct, so if there was a dude that was beating his kids and his wife. I mean, inappropriately, because sometimes no, but
Maybe I should have picked on you.
no, but I mean, I'm a very gentle man. But there was that happened, and it would be that other men in the community would alert that, hey, this dude is beating up his wife. I actually remember an example from my childhood of a guy who broke his wife's arm, and in the church community. And the dudes handled it. I don't know exactly what happened, but the other dudes handled it, and I was only kind of vaguely aware. But if you see a guy that is that, I mean, they also get ostracized too if it becomes aware. But if there is no justice, because the police have largely been emasculated in our culture. That we aren't getting justice. It's weaponized against people because of COVID and things like that. We saw those examples. But where there is no justice, there will be eventually a breaking point where people go to essentially the mafiosos and say, hey, this dude, raped my daughter. And
It's the Godfather,
police
the opening of The Godfather.
The police aren't doing anything, and I want justice. Okay, we'll give you justice.
That's right.
Yeah.
And men used to enforce that. And this is why it's not good for men to be isolated. This is why men need brotherhood. This is why men need community. It's so important.
And why men need to be that serrated edge in society. Because if we are not continuing that sense of virtue, we're going to lose, and I think it can be argued we have lost, in a sense, that sense of virtue, that serrated edge that men naturally bear. If there is an injustice taking place, who is going to rise up and say that's wrong? And right now we live in an effeminate culture in which individuals do not want to do that for sake of being blacklisted, losing their job, whatever. And there is injustices taking place with our daughters in playing sports, with men being on their teams. Take it down the line. There's a bunch of different aspects right now that we're seeing in society.
Well, and where that exists, it's really healthy. So I own a jiu-jitsu school, and oftentimes through the years, you'd have guys that come in that were brutalizing other dudes, right? Size, fitness level, things like that. Maybe they trained and have something on board because, big guy, no jiu-jitsu, no problem. Big guy, little jiu-jitsu, big problem. But we would enforce behavior. There was a natural pecking order that happened on the mat. And I remember in the early days in the, Machado world, which is where I have my black belt, which I came up from. And we would get a little signal if there was a guy that was coming in and being too rough with people, and it was, and it would be like,
Humble him.
yeah, and us mad enforcers would go over there and one after another just beat the snot out of the guy. I mean, just maim him, and then he would either straighten up really, really quick and recognize that, okay, he'd get the message, or he'd leave and never come back. And he'd go terrorize another school, and then the same thing would happen.
Yeah.
But it was, that's why you never saw fights on the mat. Guys never really lose their cool. I mean, if that ever happens, it's so unique and so unusual because we get to that pecking order, it gets established, all that gets worked out.
So it could almost be, I mean, I don't think it can be argued. I think it's a fact. Masculinity establishes order.
Yeah.
A healthy masculinity establishes
100%.
order.
And virtuous order.
Exactly. And what we discussed at the very beginning is that politics is
Organization,
right?
Yeah.
So you can't separate the two.
No.
If you want to have a healthy order, a virtuous order to a politics, it has to be masculine in its core.
Right, and in the absence of that, you have actual tyranny.